Hello, Joseph here. I'm a musician, I'm a composer, and I love talking about music right here on this channel for your eyeballs to consume. So my last video about Ravel seemed to be doing quite well actually. People seem to be interested in music history, which is delightful for me because it's basically the only thing I have enough passion to talk about in large quantities. In a previous video, I talked about the life of Ravel and his influence on music, but in the telling of his biography, we came across the character of Theodore Dubois, resident shitlord, as I like to put it. Resident shitlord. Now, I was perhaps a little bit damning in my accounting of Dubois and his influence on music. I mean, he wasn't a very nice person, especially to Ravel, but on further inspection, and isolated from the Ravel affair, in which he was a mega twat, he actually did have an influence on music, however small. And that's what I'd like to talk about today. If you're an older subscriber, please let me know what you're thinking about these new kind of music videos I've been taking. I'm actually really enjoying it so far. It's really great. I've got like 6 videos in production or something. So you'll be seeing those over the next 12 weeks. And if you're new here, that's great. Please like the video. Please subscribe. Please hit the bell, flick my bean, give me your firstborn child. Give me money on Patreon.
Joseph, please kill yourself.
So let's see if we can get to know Theodore Dubois a little better. I mean, he was a really horrible person, but so was Schubert, and Beethoven, and Mahler, and Debussy, and Handel, and... Theodore Dubois was born in the French commune of Rosnay in the northeastern region of Marne on the 24th of August 1837. Not much, at least from what I can find, is known about his early life, but we do know that he first studied music under the guidance of Louis Fanart, who was the main choirmaster of the Reims cathedral, which, no shade, but it looks suspiciously like the Notre Dame. Dubois would then go on to study music at the Paris Conservatoire, where he would be taught by such greats as Marmontel, Ambroise Thomas, Bazin, and other people who I've never heard of. Unlike his mortal enemy-to-be, Ravel, he actually won quite a few prizes during his time at the Conservatoire, including a first prize for organ in 1859, and then, just 2 years later, he would go on to snatch the coveted Prix de Rome. This would mark the proper beginning of his career, most significantly in teaching and choir mastering, as in 1868 he would become the master at the Church of the Madeleine. He would work there for 3 years until he took over the role of choirmaster from César Franck at the Basilica of Sainte Clotilde, which also looks like the Notre Dame. Am I just uneducated? Dubois would then return to the Church of the Madeleine in 1877, taking over from Camille Saint-Saëns as the primary organist. A lot of my sources differ with regards to specific dates and years, and I think this is probably because Dubois is so obscure that a lot of the information has been lost to time. So take this all with a little grain of salt because some of the dates might not be exact. All throughout this time of choir mastering and organ playing, Dubois would teach at the Paris Conservatoire. He was first hired to teach harmony in 1871, and then would become professor of composition in 1891, and then, only 5 years after that, would become the director of the entire conservatoire. Now it's important to remember that France in the late 19th century was a very significant country on the world stage. Not only was France politically and economically powerful, due to its vast colonial empire spanning across Africa, Southeast Asia, and the Americas, France was also a cultural powerhouse in the West. France was seen across the world as a center for the arts and sciences, with countless significant inventors, scientists, painters, poets, and most importantly, composers. Hopefully this gives you context for how much power Dubois really held at the height of his career. He had significant influence in government, and he was the director of the Paris Conservatoire. It was essentially his job to guide French music in whatever direction he viewed most suitable. And in my opinion, he didn't do a particularly great job at it. Dubois, much like his contemporary Camille Saint-Saëns, who I might talk about in another video, please let me know if you'd be interested, was undoubtedly, unavoidably, a very conservative man. He not only despised every aspect, every shred of the modernist movement, having utterly banned the teaching of Wagner at the Conservatoire, he also didn't really like many older composers either, having also banned teaching on Rameau, the 18th century French composer. Basically, he restricted teaching to only the styles of like 3 men, all of them obviously white, but this is composition we're talking about, and quashed any attempt to stray from the rigid rules that he set. This is also where he and Ravel would begin their many-year-long feud, all down to Ravel's progressive approach to music. I don't I don't direct a conservatoire, and obviously hindsight is 2020 and all that, but what Dubois was doing, at least in my opinion, was no less violent than throttling the music school. He was hell-bent on strangling French music in an attempt to hold on to old values. If you're a student at music school, especially a composer, you need freedom and space to thrive. The young mind is so flexible and it has such a brilliant capacity to innovate, to think outside of boxes we didn't even know existed, and to restrict that because of short-sightedness is actually quite saddening. I'm not trying to sound catastrophic. Dubois wasn't Satan, he wasn't evil, but I think he was unwittingly robbing his students of the chance to participate in the fantastic revolution for music that was modernism. Obviously, it's easy to judge from our perspective 150 years into the future, but to be fair to Dubois, it is important to remember the context of the time. People were just more conservative back then, but it's also crucial to remember the history preceding Dubois. From around the 1600s all the way to the Romantic period, the rules of music had all stayed pretty much established and respected and the same. The styles definitely changed and rules were broken or stretched, but music never strayed too far away from the tonal. So imagine you're Dubois, and all you've ever known is standard tonality, keys, leading tones, perfect resolution, and then, after a very successful career in such tonal music, a bunch of ruffians turn up and say,
"No, we're not doing that,"
and proceed to utterly disintegrate all the structures and traditions you hold dear. That would be quite scary. He clearly cared very much about these traditions, and when you care so much about something, anybody who poses a threat to the sanctity of that tradition is, quite naturally, seen as an enemy. Conservatism in art, at least in my opinion, is almost always wrong and misguided, no matter the context. I believe that reactionary beliefs have no place in music, and only seek to hold it back. But nonetheless, I can, at least on a human level, empathize with Dubois. Dubois' conservatism, however, would mark his downfall, as his eager blocking of every single one of Ravel's attempts to win the Prix de Rome, despite Ravel absolutely deserving the prize, caused a giant scandal in France, and unwittingly exposed the corruption in the upper echelons of music at the time, resulting in his swift sacking. His position as director at the Paris Conservatoire was succeeded by Gabriel Fauré, a character more sympathetic to the musical revolution happening all around him. Dubois would go into early retirement and die in 1924. Dubois isn't really known for his music very well. I mean, he wrote a lot of pieces, including operas, ballets, oratorios, chamber music, and symphonies, but a lot of his pieces have just faded into obscurity or have been lost in time. However, there are two pieces which maintain influence even to this day. First was Les Sept Paroles du Christ, the Seven Words of Christ, one of his last sacred oratorios. The complete version is scored for 3 soloists, choir, and large orchestra, but Dubois also produced a version, which is now unfortunately lost, which reduced the orchestral role to just organ, harp, timpani, and double bass. This remains in modern times as probably his most popular work, but to be honest, at least in my inflammatory opinion, I think it's kind of shit, and I will not elaborate on that opinion because I can't be asked. The second composition of significance is his Toccata in G, an organ piece which very often appears in recitals, and which I actually do kind of like. If anybody watching is an organist, please do let me know your own opinion on Dubois. It's probably very different to mine, and perhaps way more educated, so I'd like to hear it. Dubois arguably had more of an effect on music teaching, having produced a fair amount of literature on the topic. His most well-known books were On Counterpoint and Fugue, and On Harmony. Just imagine I said those in a French accent. And although highly prescriptive in nature, at least in my opinion, they have remained as seminal works in music pedagogy even to this day. There isn't a huge amount to say about Dubois. He wasn't one of the greats, and a lot of his achievements have perhaps been clouded slightly by his being a massive cog, but I do think it's a shame that he's remembered so little, and what is remembered of him is mainly negative. It makes me wonder about my own legacy as an artist, or if I even will have one, probably not. Dubois likely didn't think of himself as in the wrong, at least with regard to his conservatism, but history, and myself obviously, has decided that he was wrong. What about our own legacies? Will history decide that we were wrong when we thought otherwise? Will some of us ascend to fame or infamy? Or, like Dubois, will we all just fade into obscurity? In the end, there's no way of knowing, so all you really can do is your best. I really do hope you've enjoyed this video. It was a fast turnaround after I saw that people were interested in this, in music theory and all that. I'm going to aim for a 2-week upload schedule. I do think I'll be able to meet that goal. I mean, I've already done like most of the work for them, but I hope I'll be able to get more content out to people so that this channel can actually start growing, because that'd be really nice. And also, please let me know if there's anything you'd be interested in learning about in the future, because I'd love to do it. Well, the best thing to do is to get your subscribers to work for you and give you ideas for videos. Like the video, subscribe, give me money on Patreon, and love you. Bye.